What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Victory Life Legacy Spotlight. Today, I have a great guest, a basketball man, a former player, standout basketball guard at Potomac High School, as well as Women Mary. I have Patriot High School head coach Sherman Rivers in the building tonight. I'm very excited to have you, Coach. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Oh man, I'm glad you're able to join. You're a very busy
Yeah. You
person.
see, you had to rep during the show. You know what I mean? So,
No, I'm excited, man. It's crazy how God works and how life works, man. You and I have met the last few years, man, through our interactions, through basketball and some of the stuff I do with basketball myself. And my son is now at Patriot, and he's excited to be part of the Patriot High School basketball program. And I have other kids that I coach, and Patriot's a great school. But long before you took over at Patriot High School. You had your own career, and it's
right,
crazy because I'm a few years older than you, and I saw you play before I knew who you were,
right,
and
right.
you were part of a great run at Potomac High School. But
hmm
before we talk about your basketball career, I want to know about you. I want to know about where you from, when did it all started? Because we look at young men and men like yourself. We see basketball coach and former basketball player, but you're a father now.
hmm
You have other things. You're an educator. You're a leader, but you had to grow up yourself. When did it
Right.
all start for you? Where did you grow up at? And who are some of the people that mentored, influenced you, and that had an impact on your life, coach?
Well, it's so funny because I'm actually at my parents' house right now, sitting in my dad's office. So, clearly, him being top of the list as far as number one influential people in my lifetime. My dad was a army guy, so because of that, we did a lot of moving when I was younger. Not the typical army dad that you might think of. It wasn't like he was a super disciplinarian, but I definitely was doing what I was supposed to do. So, so just that. I mean, we lived all over the place. We spent some time in Germany when I was in kindergarten and like preschool. A lot of places in the Midwest. Lived in Kentucky, Oklahoma, Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, all over the place. So um, I'm trying to think of the order just so I can make sure I got it right. I was born in Colorado Springs. We moved to Kentucky after that for I think a year or so. Then we went to Germany. I was 3, 4, and 5. We moved to Oklahoma when I was 6, 7, and 8 years old. We moved to Missouri, where he was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, my fourth grade year, and then fifth and sixth we moved back to Colorado. Then from seventh grade on, we lived in Virginia.
So from seventh grade on, you were here in VA.
Yeah, he retired after my freshman year in high school because he didn't want me to have to move again during high school. If he
Very
didn't
good.
do that, we would have had to move to Junction City, Kansas. And that's no offense to anybody that might live there. I've never been there, but it doesn't sound like it's the most jumping place that there is.
Oh my gosh, man! I've never heard of it, man. But I'm glad you stayed in Virginia, man. I don't know if I would have met you, man. And
Right.
you ended up you're a basketball player. You were at Potomac High School.
hmm
But before you got to Potomac, when did it like you have sons and you have a great program as I mentioned when we started the show. But when did the lights turn on for you as far as like some guys it's like I just started racing people and I realized I was fast and I met this coach and I ran track or my dad was a basketball player, my grandfather. For you, when did the legacy start, the journey of being a point guard? When did you first pick up the basketball? Like when did you fall in love with the game of basketball?
I was, from young age, little having a hoop on your door, playing. The funny thing about me, and I'm sure it's the case for a lot of kids growing up, is especially around our age, I played everything. So it wasn't something where I was sitting there at like 5 years old, being like, I'm gonna make basketball my career. In my crazy brain, I thought I was gonna play every sport as a professional. So I was thinking I was going to be a professional football, basketball, baseball player. I even played soccer for a year, and my dad was like, "You sure you want to do this?"
Soccer?
I did. Like, listen, man. When you're like you said, you're in a military family, you live on base. Everybody participates in everything. I mean, I was in Cub Scouts for a little while. I just that my parents would just sign me up for stuff, so I wasn't always in the house, always doing something. So But yeah, I just always had a love of sports. I was that kid that when they used to have the book fairs, I used to get all the little sports books and remember all the stuff in them from every coach in the NFL or
Mm,
random player stats. So I've always been interested like that. I know a lot of little kids don't really watch sports. I was not that kid. I would sit down and watch games with my dad all the time. I remember going outside with my parents and either shooting or throwing a football. When I say parents, my mom was out there too, running
mm-hmm.
touchdowns on my friends when I was little. So it's so funny. Um, yeah, but it wasn't. To be honest with you, I wasn't locked in on just basketball until after my freshman year in high school.
Really?
Yeah, I was. I say this all the time, and my dad he loves to tell stories about stuff that I did. But I was a better football player than I was a basketball player.
This is why I love the legacy spotlights. I would have never guessed that. I never knew that because I see how you are with the game, and we chop it up. I see you on Twitter talking basketball, and I
Hmm.
always check for your tweets because even if I may not know that, I love the insight. But I never knew the football. I know you watch football, so
Hmm.
you were a football guy.
I was gung ho football. Like when I was growing up, like I said, I participated in everything, but I went to camps and I used to go to like football camps and would get awards during the camp, like best quarterback for like the week. And growing up, I mean, I only ended up finished being 6'1", 6 foot and 3 quarters, but we're gonna round that up. Um, and I mean, you know how it is, man. At the time, they weren't looking for 6 foot quarterbacks.
Mm-mm,
So,
mm-mm.
and just looking at the longevity of it, I started getting letters and college interest from basketball like around the end of my ninth grade year, uh, going in my 10th grade year. So just looking at what I was going to be able to go to school and do, it made more sense. And, our basketball program is really good at Potomac. So that made it an easier decision. But it was just one of those things. And I like to say it's because of the basketball program. To be honest with you, is because I was a throwing quarterback, and
Really?
the high school I went to did not throw the ball on the varsity level like that. So I remember when we got to high school, our middle school team was really good. We rip on middle,
Yeah.
and they put all of us for the most part on freshmen because they said, well, we want to keep you guys together, have you keep playing together. It's like we won the middle school championship. We got to ninth grade. We only lost one game, and I'm pretty sure that year I threw 20 touchdowns and one interception.
What?
Yeah.
What? Yo.
Listen, I'm telling you, I used to be outside with like the tire swing, doing drop backs, footwork stuff, like gung ho, trying to be the best quarterback ever to play football. And I remember the last football game I played in, it was what 96. I was in ninth grade. We're playing at Hilton. It's freezing outside. Where at the time they only let me play quarterback. They wouldn't let me play on the other side of the ball because they were worried about something happening to me. And
Mm,
so I didn't get to play on special teams. So I was freezing. I mean, at the end of the year with
yeah,
football,
yeah,
it's
yep.
cold, man. And
It's real cold.
we didn't have no warm weather gear like these kids do now. And I remember I'm standing there with my hands, they're freezing, and I remember thinking, I said, this is the last football game I'm going to play. I remember thinking that, and it was like it was yesterday. So yeah, but I mean, we had a lot of kids that went to Potomac that were probably like that. That were really good basketball players. Cliff Hawkins, Mookie Felder, all of us played football at some point in time, and we're really good. We just, our basketball stuff was so year round, and we were so competitive that it made it hard for you to miss stuff and still start because we had so many good players that if you weren't around, it really didn't skip a beat.
Yeah. You and I are from the era you mentioned it. I'm glad you touched on that because I was going to segue into that. The late 90s into the
Hmm.
early 2000s was probably the last time in high school, not just in Virginia, but throughout the country where guys didn't start specialization.
Hmm.
It was like, hey, I interviewed a guy the other day, man, Sean Hamlet, and he played with me. He was a little bit older than me, but he played at Florida State. But in high school, we played baseball, football, track, and basketball. Played
Hmm.
with some guys like Gannon Baker, played against Grant Hill, then turned around, and then played football as soon as basketball ended.
Hmm.
Um, you talk about football, and this is amazing to know, but since you were so into football, who were some of the guys that you mentioned you checked for, college or pro, or even other high school guys? Like, in your time, like when you say, you know what, I'm going to make sure I catch this game, whether it be pro or collegiate.
I
Who?
was I was I was a big Charlie Ward fan. Um, that was obviously around the time when I was like in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, I was, I still think that he's probably. I know everybody likes to have different goat debates on who's the best of all time,
Ah.
but I always say Joe Montana is probably the best quarterback that I see. And I know that he had all these weapons on the perimeter, and everybody talks about him all the time in the system. But I was a huge Joe Montana fan growing up, and then obviously John Elway. So I'm dating myself, but those were like the kind of two top guys that I kind of looked at. And it was so funny. Every year I played football, I either wore number 7 or I would wear number 16.
Hmm.
Uh, and then obviously, you later on you see Doug Williams, who finally was starting and won a Super Bowl with the Redskins at the time. So, and of course, when around that time it happened, so of course I wanted to throw on number 17 and wear it a couple times. So starting to see guys like that at the professional level was big for me at a young age. But it was more so, like you said, Charlie Ward, like college football, Cordell Stewart. Watching those guys when I was growing up and seeing what they were doing at the collegiate level, because they said we didn't see a whole lot of black quarterbacks at the pro level, other than Warren Moon, who my mom was in love with. But I just I wasn't an Oilers fan, so I didn't really want to watch them very much. But he was a great quarterback. I actually saw him play live when we lived in Missouri. We went and watched them play the Chiefs. I saw him throw for 500 yards.
Woo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
Warren
Listen, he could
Moon.
throw
Warren
that thing.
Moon was special, and again, he doesn't get the credit he deserved because he spent the first part of his career, I believe, in the USFL,
He did.
and
He
he put
did.
up astronomical numbers and came to
He was in the
NFL.
USFL and in Canada for a little
Yeah,
bit.
and it took away
So
from his legacy in NFL. There's debate right now whether he should be considered for the Hall of Fame.
I
Um,
mean,
and,
it's wild to think about because, and then people try to disparage you because he played in the run and shoot, and it's like, listen, you can throw the ball, you can throw the ball. It doesn't matter what system it's in. It was highly successful.
mm,
So to talk about it like he wasn't out there playing football like the rest of them because it wasn't prototypical three-step drop, and
yeah,
they didn't have it all spread out. This was back when it wasn't cool to play spread football. Everybody wanted to
hmm
line up in the I
hmm
formation and run it down your throat. But,
yeah, yeah.
mm-hmm.
You mentioned your days at Potomac and some of the guys you played with. When I moved to Northern Virginia, after my pro career, my wife is from up here, so I moved up here. Instantly loved it right away. It was different for me, but I knew a lot of people up here. But then I began to realize that now living up here, there were some really good athletes, especially over there where you were at that Route One corridor.
Yep.
That area reminded me a lot of my part of Hampton and Newport News, and the fact that you guys played sports and had a mindset very similar to what we had in Hampton and Newport News, and even in Norfolk and Portsmouth. And
Right.
I met some great guys who I'm very close with now, guys like Keenan Carter. Uh,
That's my boy. I
yeah,
talk to Keenan every day, man.
Keenan
Every
is
day.
my guy. He, big supporter of Victory Life, man. Me and him used to do some
You,
7-on-7 stuff together. And
Keenan's really close with my family. When I was in the 12th grade, he was in the ninth.
mm,
So when I left, my dad coached JV at Potomac. So he used to be over at my house sleeping on the couch when I was in college. Like he would ride down my dad to come to my college games. So he's like a brother.
yeah, I love Keenan, and him and I, we helped a lot of young men together. Now he's coaching at William and Mary with Mike London
Mm-hmm.
and my guy Muffin Curry, Armando Curry, Ronald Curry's cousin.
Yep.
But he was the one, along with some other guys, that got me hip, and then I started to meet guys like Dominique and Zach Terrell, and
Mm-hmm.
just
Me and
guys,
Muffin, me and Muffin played AAU together on Boo Williams.
Oh, I didn't know you were on that team.
I played with Keith Willis, Dave Fanning, and all them. Daryl
Wow.
Daryl Towle. Like I went with them to the Super Showcase and Peach Jam going
Oh,
into my
okay.
senior year. Yeah.
That's what's up, man. Yeah, man. Great athletes, great players, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
was Potomac, the Route One corridor. I've been living in Northern Virginia now for 20 plus years, and no matter what state you go to, no matter what county, there's always labels and misconceptions, and people say, oh, well, those guys over there are hood or ghetto. Um, when you got there and you had the perspective, a unique one indeed, where you have traveled the world, so to speak, at least the country.
Right.
What did you think about Potomac and you know what did you embrace when you got there? Like, what did you like about it? Was there an edge with those guys?
Oh, I mean, listen, like I said, I moved here in middle school, so I got to see some stuff before I actually got to Potomac. Um,
Mm.
it was a different world living on Army bases compared to going to Ripon Middle School. I can tell you that. Um, the first day of school, I was like, man, this joint is wild. I remember thinking, like, you know, and I know that Potomac gets a bad rap, and a lot of people have said some different things about it. And I think it's a lot of the reason why people that went there or played sports there have such a passion for the school, because everybody kind of turned their nose up at it and kind of looked down on it because of the type of kids and the environment. But I'm not going to sugarcoat or lie to you. It was not the easiest place to be at. Um, and I know there's way worse situations, inner cities and down in the beach area possibly, but I some of the stuff that I saw there and stuff that would happen there, and people don't believe it, but it wasn't too far off from being like lean on me on some days. I can tell you that
I
much.
believe it. I believe I
Hmm.
work in the county and I know exactly what you're talking about. And Keenan and I have had a lot of conversations, man. And
Yeah,
I think that's why we got so close, man. Real recognize real iron sharp as iron.
right. Because you got
Um,
to remember that there was no Freedom High School, there was no Forest Park,
no,
so the entirety of Route One went to Potomac. So all of those neighborhoods that weren't the best neighborhoods were all at one school.
no doubt.
So it was just like you said, it was stuff that would happen. There was gang issues in the school. There was weapons issues at the school. Sometimes it was just a lot of stuff happened. Now it's a lot of great people that were there, a lot of great people that helped us through it. But it wasn't easy. I'm not going to say that for sure.
Yeah. Did y'all have that? And again, because I work in the county now, I don't know how it was. I didn't grow up here, but I know it's prevalent now. That whole 400, 500 thing, was
What
that
is that?
prevalent? That's the
What?
little gangs. Jawan and all those guys,
Oh no, it
four
was
hundred,
it was.
five hundred.
Oh no, see, I don't. That shows you how I touch on it. It wasn't 400, 500. It was 55 and
Yes.
Georgetown.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
So
Georgetown
like I
Gray.
said, 55 was like the kids from Williamstown,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously Georgetown Village was right across the street. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was to the point that they wouldn't even let us wear Georgetown Hoya stuff to school.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I remember there was a clothing line called RP55,
Yeah.
and clearly they adopted that as like their own like little clothing line. So, and this tells you how insane some of the stuff the kids would do to each other just to disrespect each other. The kids from one gang would wear like Georgetown stuff, and then they would put big black X tape over like the Hoyas, the Georgetown, and then the other gang would get the 5-5 clothes and cut the 5-5 out the shirt. And it was
Wow.
like, not listen. And so it was, you know, there are certain parts of the hallway that people stood on. There were certain parts you're like, you probably don't need to walk over there. Back when they used to have the old AMC Potomac Mills over there, not where it's at now, but it was on the
Yeah.
other
The
side.
other side. I remember. I
Yeah.
remember.
I remember it used to be something where kids would hang out outside there and everything was cool. And then one day somebody got stabbed outside. And it was when you got there, they would ask you where you going. You had to go inside, go to your movie. It wasn't no hanging out there anymore.
Mm.
So it was carnivals. Something always bad would happen. You know,
Yeah. No. That's
I
what I.
saw you make a post about it.
Yes, and
Like,
that's
yeah,
what made me understand when I moved up here,
mm-hmm,
because I was living in Fairfax County at the time, and that's when I met a lot of guys because I started getting into youth sports and just all the county work I was doing, and I met guys like Kenyon, and they hit me to like, nah, it's not sweet everywhere. It's a
no,
lot like where you from in Eastern Newport News.
mm-hmm.
So with all that going on, how do you rise? How do you rise above that? Was it when you got into sports and then you got into basketball? Like, because I know you weren't gonna get caught up given the home you live in, but at the same time, guys from good homes get caught up. How did you rise above and get focused?
I mean, like I said, man, my parents are awesome. My parents still would. If I played in the men's league today, they'd come and watch me play in that. So they were always at stuff. They were those parents that went to every game. I never had to worry about having a ride home. On Friday nights after games, a lot of the kids would come stay at my house, because obviously their situations might not have been like mine. So my dad was always a big role model and example for how you're supposed to act and what you're supposed to do. Now, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
my mom being amazing like she is. So I never really got caught up in any of the nonsense that was going on as far as like wanting to be out and getting into knucklehead sort of stuff. It just
Mhm.
wasn't who I was.
So let's talk about basketball because that's what I
Hmm.
knew you from. I didn't know about the quarterback stuff. Makes me happy.
Right.
But
Listen, if it was up to my dad, I would have played baseball because I'm not like all the games he's been to. The loudest I've ever heard him is when I was playing baseball middle school and I got the hit to start off the season. So if he
wow,
had to choose, I would have played baseball. But I
that's what's
just
up.
I got over people throwing the ball really hard with no control at me.
I couldn't rock. I
Yeah.
couldn't rock. I was 6'4", 6'5". I won't touching that. Them baseball players have my respect. You know,
Yeah, man.
trying to hit a baseball coming at you. Between
Hmm.
that and knocking in a golf ball,
Yeah.
that's accuracy, hand-eye coordination, and skill. Like people
Yeah.
sleep on baseball because it's labeled boring because they play so many games. And
Right.
I watch the baseball playoffs, and if you know anybody that plays baseball,
Yeah.
takes skill. It's not just up there just swinging away. It's technique,
Yeah.
man. Um,
Exactly.
but coach, you end up being a dynamic point guard. Um,
Hmm.
when did the switch come on? I know you were a multi-sport athlete, but when did the switch come on where you were like, you know what, I'm going to stand out and I'm going to commit to this game, and then you became a dynamic point guard because you coach kids now, and you've been
Hmm.
around some great players at Patriot and at Potomac and other schools. Women, Mary, you played overseas. We're gonna get into all of that here in a second, man. But a lot of
Hmm.
guys think they're working hard, or they think they're ready for the game when the lights come on. But a lot of guys shrink. You weren't that kind of player.
Right. I mean,
What
it's
happened?
I mean, it's one of those things, man. It's just the area, especially at that time. Obviously we had a lot of great athletes, but the big difference I feel like between our area and where you were is that we didn't have a lot of multiple sport guys. It was just kind of few and far between the guys that did. So being around guys that like eat, sleep, and breathe basketball all the time, it just and at the school I was at, you couldn't really slack off because if you did, next thing you know, you weren't going to be playing. And not
Mhm.
like, oh, I might get my minutes cut. Like I'm not going to start anymore. But like I said, we had guys on our bench that could have went somewhere else and averaged 20 points a game. Just
Mm.
giving an example, we had a guy named John Alexander that couldn't get on the floor for us. He transfers. This is back before people started doing the whole private school thing like that. He transfers to Paul VI, and he ends up getting a Division I scholarship to play at Boston University.
Wow.
And he wasn't playing for us, and he was going to be a low minutes guy. But that happens when you got a high school team that has Mookie Felder, who at the time was a McDonald's All American nominee. You had Cliff Hawkins, who ends up being the starting point guard at Kentucky. You
Mm.
have myself, who was getting letters from basically every school in Virginia and outside of that. We had another guard guy named Robert Hall, who was really good. That was borderline D1, D2 guy, and so that was just in our starters. So, and it was crazy to think that every day, like it's so funny watching kids like that. I'm so glad that they have all these different outlets and opportunities to train and do all this stuff. But we didn't have that. We had open gyms, and so we go
Yeah.
to open gym and we would play against guys. And the big difference now, I think, between now and the kids growing up today is a lot of the rules in place have been made that you can't really have that old head influence in your gym.
Yep.
Um, so we used to be at open gyms at our high school or at other high schools, which you can't do now. You can't go to other high schools
Yep.
and go to open gyms, which is insane. And we would be playing against guys that were either playing in college or were older guys, maybe playing pro or weren't playing pro, but were really good men's league players. And they would be telling you, "Hey, you got to do this," and when you would screw up, they would call you out on it, or you wouldn't get picked up because you didn't do an assignment correctly or you missed somebody open.
Hmm.
So you really had to be mentally locked in because you weren't just in a gym doing a bunch of reps on something by yourself where you could screw it up a bunch of times. You had to impress your peers, the people that were already graduated who you looked up to. On top of that, fight off the guys that were coming up behind you because it's just a cycle of greatness being at that school. So, I was blessed enough to have a dad that I had options of being able to go work out on military bases as well and get beat up by military guys playing in the gym. The old Larson's gymnasium that was on Quantico's base, it wouldn't be able to be open now. It wasn't any air conditioning there. The
Yeah.
big old, it was a big old plane hangar, and they just had those huge industrial fans blowing hot air all over the place. So I used to be up there with my dad, and he would work me out individually, and I would lift with him, and then go to open gyms. We played in I don't know how many different summer leagues or fall leagues. We would travel around and play places, anywhere we could find games to play at. And the biggest thing is we wanted to do is we wanted to represent for our area, because like you said, you had a certain idea of the type of kids that we were here, and we knew it wasn't the truth. So especially when we play you all from down there, or we would play teams from Richmond, or we would go out and play teams from PG County.
No
It
doubt.
was, it was very important that we represented our brand of basketball and where we were from, but at the same time, like trying to get yourself your own recognition as an individual. I tell kids every day on our team. I said, listen, it's okay to want to compete with the guys on your team to get more publicity than they do.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
That's I
Yeah.
mean, you're mad as long as it doesn't go to a super selfish place and it doesn't go to a negative place. We'd be mad that somebody was on the front page of the sports page that day and it wasn't you, or that, man, he had 20, I want to get 20. But as long as it doesn't make you selfish and get away from the team aspect, and that was us, man. It was great because we were super tight playing wise. Now, listen, we didn't all hang out together outside of playing, but we were tight and we competed and we had each other's back. And to this day, we could all go out. It's so funny. We played in like a church league over here on 234, and a lot of us played together. And we were running some of the same stuff we ran in high school, like it was like yesterday.
Really?
And
That's crazy.
I feel like that's just the difference between the kids that I know a lot of kids will say this when they were at Woodbridge or Garfield, but it wasn't. They weren't like us. It was just like you said. We were our own school. We were built different than everybody else. Like our building doesn't look like anybody
Nope.
else's.
Nope. No, it,
So
it doesn't. It doesn't.
right, and so like I said, all that stuff blended to us being super tight, having a chip on our shoulder, and wanting to prove ourselves every day.
Yeah, and I saw that before I knew you and before I met Keenan and everybody from there. I saw that when you matched up with the great Ronald Curry. And the first time I saw Potomac play, their brand of basketball in person was in, I believe it was the state championship in 97. 90, it was in Lynchburg. It was the first one was in Lynchburg.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys had a squad.
Yeah,
You guys had a squad. Like that's before VHSL reclassified football and basketball.
And you had to play everybody.
You played everybody. So if you got to the state championship back then,
Right.
you went through a gauntlet. And
Yeah,
and I was at Virginia Tech at the time. And a lot of us rode down. We weren't even just going to see Ronald Curry. Northern Virginia, there were a lot of guys up at Tech too. So, because it's a Virginia school.
Right.
We went car loads deep. And we sat there, man, and both teams were going at it, man.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
I mean, it was great, man. This is obviously before the super internet age of everything. So the stuff that we saw about Ronald Curry, I don't even know if Coach Hayes gave it to everybody else or he just gave it to me as an example. But, I remember reading an article about him having a 3.5 GPA and being this and that. And I didn't really know who he was. Now, I'd heard some stuff because I had my godparents and, my god sisters or cousins, whatever you want to call them, they went to Hampton.
Oh.
So they told me all the time about Ronald Curry and what he's doing. And when y'all play them, they're going to beat you. And I was like, man, I'm like, whatever, man. Y'all don't know anything about how good we are, so.
And it's like you being nice because I know you and you're a competitor, and I know what the real version went like. Because I know how you guys talk, and I know how we talk, especially during that time frame.
Right.
That's the clean version.
Right. So I remember when we finally got to that point, it was they won it in 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
So my freshman year, we got knocked out in the regionals by William Fleming. So didn't make it back. So to get back to the championship game with a lot of guys that were, kind of first year starters, like Cliff was a freshman at the time, I'm a sophomore, our first year starting on varsity, and to go through the season and get to that point. And, unfortunately, we get to the game and our leading scorer, Shawan Williams, hurts his ankle, I want to say on the jump ball. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was one of those freak accident sort of things. So he tried to tough through it, didn't work out. Clearly, Hampton was extremely talented. So to go in without a fully loaded clip of everything that we needed, and we were used to dictating and defensive pressure and making guys uncomfortable. Well, you weren't really making Ronald Curry uncomfortable when you're 6'3", however much he weighed, point guard, doing 360s in the paint.
Yeah.
So it was a good lesson for us to get there. I felt like it definitely helped us the next year because then we were able to go back again and play them in the semifinal because they rotated it. And that game, instead of getting up and playing pressure man to man, we played them zone, which is something Potomac never did. So it threw them off by seeing that. So I think Ron went like 0 for 8 from the 3-point line,
He did. I
which
was at that game.
so and then Cliff had an amazing game, scoring 31 points. So we were able to win that in the semifinal, and that was without Mookie playing because he had been suspended for the rest of the season for some stuff. So we got into the championship game and had to play GW Danville, and once again we had played them in the regional championship. Won at the buzzer, not to toot my own horn, but I made the shot to win the game at the buzzer.
That's what's up. Nah, you can toot your horn. It's your legacy spotlight.
So
yeah,
made the shot to win the game at the buzzer at Lynchburg College. So we get to the state championship, man. We're beat up. We undersized. Like you saw our teams. Everybody was like 6'2" and below. So we're playing GW Danville, who's front line. They were number 1 in the state most of the season. So when we beat them, it was like kind of like an upset, which is crazy because we only had like 3 losses on the year. But when you got 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" starters in your high school, public school lineup, you're probably going to be favored. And then your point guard is committed to go to University of Richmond.
Yeah.
So we played them in the championship game, and it was just like a buzzsaw. We got beat and lost, and my whole goal was to not let the cameras get a picture of me crying in the newspaper again like they did the year before. So I tried to put a towel on my head, but they still got a picture of me. And I remember it was a picture of me and Cliff Hawkins, and he was in my ear, and he was telling me, he said, we're going to be back here. We're going to do this again. And then after that, in the spring, Cliff decided that he was going to transfer to Oak Hill. So we were the only 2 coming back from the team that played a lot. So that next year it wasn't quite the same because I was the only experienced varsity guy left. But it was. I look back on my high school career, and to be honest with you, it was the most fun I ever had playing basketball. And I can talk all day about how good of a coach I think that Kendall Hayes was. Just from a coaching standpoint, he's had the biggest influence on me as far as like how he approached the work and coached us and was just so smart with his basketball acumen, but at the same time didn't choke us with his knowledge of the game by making us robots. And I think that was one thing that gets lost on a lot of people with how good of a coach he was. Like a lot of people think, oh, you had all this talent, of course you won a lot of games. Well, it wasn't like we were playing scrubs. Woodbridge High School was really good as well with a great coach, and Coach Robinson. Garfield was really good with Andy Gray, who was coaching there, had a lot of talent. So he just knew how to get the best out of us and have us compete, but at the same time, not make us into robots. I mean, the team that won in 95, 96 was completely different from the team that got there in 96 and 97.
And the team on 95 didn't have my guy on it,
Roland.
They ended up going to Virginia Tech.
Roland was there. They had Tynell Harris. So Roland was 6'7". Tynell was 6'4". They had Mike Neal, who's probably one of the most underrated guys ever playing Virginia, about 6'4". So you had this big lineup of guys. And then to switch it to 2 years later to have all point guards starting. and like not skip a beat as far as how successful you are. And then, it just, like I said, he was a great basketball mind and way to motivate guys, even if it wasn't some language that you wanted to hear a lot of times. So,
you know, tell me a little bit about it, because you mentioned Richmond and Tidewater. Those areas have always been outspoken about their districts, their region. I've been living in Northern Virginia now, so I have the unique perspective of talking about Northern Virginia and Tidewater. But during your time frame, you talked about football, but who were some of the guys that on a Wednesday night or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever, you in the district playing, you had to lace them up tight for? You were like, okay, this guy over here at Woodbridge, or this guy, if you cross over to Manassas, whatever, like, or even in any school, when you reflect on your high school career, you were like, okay, these guys can go.
I mean,
I
it's
enjoyed it.
one of those it's one of those things that, like I said, this was pre everybody thinking that private school was the answer. So
Mm-hmm.
every night we were playing somebody that could get it. I talk about somebody that nobody really talks about a whole lot from our area, but might arguably be one of the best players to ever come out of it. Tommy Adams played at Hilton High School,
Mm,
and you don't think of Hilton being a basketball school, which it was not. But
mm.
Tommy was one of the better players in the area. Um, and crazy enough, we talk about multiple sport guys. He actually was he was probably the best soccer player in the area. They won the national championship when he was at Hilton.
Soccer and basketball?
Listen, so when he decided to commit to go to school. He was a year ahead of me. He committed to go to Hampton, and we're like, for what? They said for basketball. I said, you serious? Like we were shocked, couldn't believe it. Now he was really good, but like national championship level for soccer. And then this dude ends up going to Hampton. They win in the tournament. Remember Dave Bing that was down there?
He played with Marseille Brown.
He
My
played
guy
with
Marseille Brown. That's right.
play with Marseille. They upset Iowa State
Yep.
in that game, and
As a
then
15 seed.
the next there was either the next year or maybe the year after that he was scored 25 points against UConn in the tournament.
That
Ends
guy
up,
played soccer?
yeah.
That's crazy.
So he ends up getting the chance to go to camp with the Celtics and plays overseas for a long time. I mean, that's somebody who in our district they came in fourth or fifth place. So, Garfield having Kareem guys like Kareem Kyer over there, and Billy Perkins was another person that played there. Woodbridge, who was our main rival, it was always a knockout drag down game. Nick Clay, Umar Bowers, Maurice Watkins,
Mm.
Marvin Jefferson. So, and it wasn't any, and you're always going to get people's best shot being at Potomac anyway. So we didn't want to come into games and make people think that they could play with us if they couldn't.
Mm.
It's just
Y'all were physical. Y'all were aggressive. When I saw y'all play those couple years in the States, I remember y'all talk trash. Y'all
mm-hmm.
were physical. Y'all played with an edge, but it wasn't 1990s New York. It wasn't Anthony Mason, Xavier. It wasn't dirty. It
No,
wasn't Bill Laimbeer.
we
It
weren't
was
big enough for
but
that.
it was great basketball. I mean, that's that fine line between labeling and
Correct.
not respecting the sport, because it was very reminiscent, and I don't know if that's what your head coach wanted. It was very reminiscent of what the Hoyas did in the late 80s under John Thompson.
Yeah.
They picked you up full court. You guys did that. You because I remember when y'all beat Muffin and Ron C, y'all were
Mm-hmm.
in them.
Yeah.
That rematch, y'all were in
Listen,
them.
I mean, it was an edge we played with, like you said, where we lived at, and the environment that we were in for school. We had an edge to us, and it was like we knew we were the tough ones in the area.
Mm,
We were the people like, man, they you don't want to mess with them too much. And,
hmm.
obviously we would get it back from other teams, but and going down there, we felt like we had something to prove. I mean, you're a beach guy. Y'all don't think anybody's tough up here. So
Hmm.
we had to ratchet it up. And on the flip side of it, we didn't think anybody was tough outside of that. Didn't go to Potomac. So we when we played teams from like Fairfax or Manassas or something like that, we was like, man, these dudes can't mess with us. Like, we go, y'all scared to walk in the gym with us.
Mm.
So and that's the type of edge we had, playing the game of basketball. So it came out in the way that we would compete and play and defend, which was always at the forefront of everything that we did, was how well we defended and how much we got after it defensively.
No doubt. Coach, you mentioned scholarships and all the guys you played with and how many of them went on. You were getting recruited. And I remember when I met you, you shared about your time going to William and Mary. How did that come about? Like, because William and Mary is a phenomenal university, but you had offers from some schools that had more credibility as a basketball program.
Yeah, I mean,
How did
I
that
mean,
come about?
I remember at the time I had an offer from Tech. They told me I was their number one recruit on their list. I'm sure they probably told 5 other kids that, but it's all good. Uh, UVA, Mason, James Madison, Old Dominion, South Florida, Bucknell. Uh, and
Bucknell, wow.
yeah, it was a bunch of other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head. And I should have kept all that stuff, but you don't think about it at the time. But William Mary does a good job of selling parents on you going there. They get you
Hmm.
on campus and they show your parents stuff. They talk about all that education stuff, and
Hmm.
it was important for me to go somewhere where I could play too. I didn't want to go sit on the bench.
No
Uh,
doubt.
but I probably would have ended up at Tech, but at the time it was something that just didn't sit really well with me as far as like the miscommunication between the head coach and the assistant coach. And so once they did that, I was like, I'm good.
Who was that? Was that
it
Foster?
was it was it was Hussey
Hussey.
and
Hussey.
and Donnie Marsh was the assistant
Okay.
at the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was actually when I went down and played with Boo down at the Peach Jam.
Hmm.
And I didn't play necessarily like myself. And they were like, well, we don't know, because when you played against this sort of competition, this is what you're like. I was like, all right, that's fine. Because when you got like 7 to 10 other options, you don't really break your neck over
No
something.
doubt.
It would have been nice. Roland was there at the time, and it
Oh,
would have
you
been
would have
something
met
that,
me and it would have been on.
oh, you already know, right? So it just,
Yeah.
but it's so funny because my time at William Mary, we played Tech. How many times? We played them 3 times.
Yep.
I want to say while I was there, and we won twice.
Mm.
So, and in 2 of those games, I was the leading scorer. So it is what it is, man. You can look at stuff and be like, man, I should have went here. I should have did this. My reasoning for going to William Mary at the time made a lot of sense. Unfortunately, the coach that recruited me to go there retired after my freshman year. So the rest of it didn't quite turn out how I pictured it, but it makes you who you are.
And you still got the education and you still played basketball. And I tell my son and 2 daughters and all the kids I mentor, counsel, and even the kids I coach in football and basketball, you are very blessed if you're able to play at the next level. Not only
Hmm.
high school, but definitely college.
Right.
Even as we sit here and reflect on your phenomenal career as a player, and we'll talk about your career as a coach here shortly, but you still played at a high level and you
Hmm.
played on TV and you played in memorable games.
Right. Right. I
That
mean,
is
it's
that
it's
shouldn't be,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a blessing.
Yeah,
That's
man.
everybody,
Like,
especially let's keep it real, especially whether it's the 757 or the 703 or whatever,
hmm
the Route 1 corridor has seen a lot of failures. The same
yeah.
way Hampton Newport News had. A lot of people are in 13th grade. They're in their second childhood talking about
hmm
Friday nights, man. That used to be me.
Listen, they still doing it, and it's so funny because, like you said, growing up in the areas we grow up in, they when they see you being successful, the first thing they want to say, "Oh, I could do that if you doing it."
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're not. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like my freshman year we played at Duke. Right
Wow.
now we got our butts kicked,
Still,
but
but you still played at
right we
Duke.
played at Duke and Cameron Indoor. If I'm a sidetrack to this story. I actually had an opportunity to go to Duke after my senior year.
What?
Uh, yeah,
What?
it was I had already committed to William Mary and signed my letter of intent early. Like I already did that, like in October. So I'd already committed. But after UConn beat Duke in the national championship that year,
99, right?
and so my coach, I was up. Coach Hayes was the driver's ed teacher, so he was up in the tower. And I'm a senior. It's the springtime. I'm not really spending a whole lot of time in class because I don't have a whole lot to do at this point anyway. I got all my stuff squared away. So I used to be up there hanging out with him, and listen to him yell at kids over the microphone in the driver's ed range. And I remember he's telling me, he said, "Yeah, Duke called me today." And like, our season just ended not that long ago. I'm like, they didn't call about none of them other dudes on the team. Like, that's what I'm thinking in my head. I was like, for what? He's like, "Oh, they called about you." I said, "What did they want?" He was like, "They wanted to see if you were still available." I said, "Well, what did you say?"
Oh my goodness.
And so he was like, "I told him you had already committed." I said, "Well, we could at least talk about this first."
Oh, because that's when they had your boy William Avery.
Well, he left.
He left. That's
So
what I'm saying. There
it
was
was William Avery, Elton Brand, but that was also the year they brought in Jason Williams, Mike Dunleavy, Carlos Boozer,
true,
and they still had Shane Battier and Chris Carrawell.
Yeah.
So I would have went there. I would have sat my butt on the bench. Would have never touched the floor.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit
Yeah.
as I went through in 4 years.
Yeah.
Would that have been fun for me? I don't think competitively I would have been okay with it. I started 8 to 10 games as a freshman at William and Mary. That wasn't going to happen at Duke. I mean, like I said, we played at Duke. We played at Purdue while I was at William and Mary. We played at Maryland the year they won the national championship. We played all the way out in New Mexico. It just, those are the type of things that, like, to be on the floor and to have those opportunities. Would I've liked to have gone to the tournament and been on TV for that, but would I've liked to have been on TV sitting on the bench holding my arms with somebody else's?
Yeah.
Or would I've liked to play some games on television where people can actually see me playing?
And I'm talking as a fan, because at the end of the day, I read your tweets and we've had conversations. I see your posts on Facebook, especially on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
All these guys get hung up with a name. I've seen it in football and basketball. Even when I chose Tech, Virginia Tech in '94, when I chose them over. I had 30 plus offers. I chose them. People were like, "Dude, Florida's calling you.
Right.
Like, where the heck is Virginia Tech at? What?" But I went because it felt right. I knew I was going to play, and it felt good for me. Now, all of a sudden, of course, they're more of a household name. They're a respected program.
Right.
So Women Marry, same thing. I get it. And I think a lot of guys get hung up on that. And with that being said, I do want to sidetrack before we talk about your postgraduate career, Coach. You and I have had a few conversations, and not just one-on-one, but I've seen your tweets, and I listen to you. Even if I didn't have kids going to your school, I knew. There is a trend the last 16 years or so, especially the last 10, where everybody's got to go to a private school, especially in basketball, football a little bit, but you still have guys like the Stromans and whatever going to the Patriots and Unity Reed. But for basketball, there's this misconception, or there's this trend where if you're not at a private school, you're not a baller, or you're less of a player. And again, I get it. For some parents, it's just about they want smaller classes, they have the money, it's closer for their commute, or it's a lineage where their uncles went there, dads. But for some of these kids, they're transferring all over the place. There's bouncing around. I'm new to it now because of my role with the basketball community, but you've been around it. You see it. What are your thoughts about that?
Every situation is different. I can see where for some kids it makes sense. The problem is that everybody thinks it makes sense for them now. Everybody has gotten their mind. And listen, it's a double-edged sword. It's not just about the kids and the parents. Us as coaches, I feel like I can't really speak on what happened while I was gone playing college and overseas because I wasn't around. But I know how it was when I was playing here and how it is when I came back and started coaching. It's everybody has different tools that they can use to try to get what they want. And we talked about this, how kids have a lot of access to a lot of different things now that we didn't have access to. The problem with that is that you have a lot of parents looking at these things like investments, and they want a payoff on their investment at the end. And so they're going to do everything they can to try to get a payoff on these investments. So I'm not going to spend all this money on training and having kids worked out by somebody to not have them get recruited how I feel like they could, so they can go to school without having to pay for it. Instead of thinking like, hey, everybody doesn't go to school for free. It's few and far between. And the other part about it is the thing, like I said, the catch-22 is like, well, if we didn't have everybody leaving and going to private school, that would make the public school that much more competitive, and the coaches would want to come watch that. But on the other side of it is like, what are we as coaches doing to make it so the kids feel like they're getting the level of recruitment that they want to get, that they would get at that level?
Mm.
I've talked with Anthony Mills down at Colonial Forge about a lot of different ideas and stuff we want to do. And I won't say it all out loud because I don't want people
Yeah.
to steal them.
No, no
But,
doubt. Don't
you
don't
know,
do it. Don't do
right.
it.
But, it's just there's more that we can do to make their decision more difficult as far as like if that's the better decision for them.
Mhm.
It's hard to argue with kids that are going to play in the WCAC, going to play. I'm not talking about going to sit on the bench, but going to play.
Keyword play.
Right. It's hard to argue with them and have an opportunity to go do that. It like you said, you get into like a gray area trying to argue with kids who want to go to say lower level private schools when they have a chance to reclassify. And it's like you get into, is it a good idea for you to go somewhere and reclassify and just be paying for another year of school when you're still going to get the same level of recruitment if you just were at your public school?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. It's just I would love it if it was like how it was when we were growing up, how everybody just competed at the public school
I
level.
wish it was.
But it's not. And for me just to sit around and be bothered by it or upset by it would just defeat the purpose and would take away from what I can do to try to help kids and make them better. It just it's the better our product is, the more competition we have. You would like to see it. It's just so many different roster spots from a football standpoint. Football doesn't have those issues as far as having Division I athletes being recruited out of Prince William County that basketball has.
Yeah.
You were asking me about some of the battles that we had when we played. We were playing teams that had multiple Division I guys on their basketball teams.
Hmm.
Now you might have two Division I kids in the entire county,
Yeah.
which is
And
crazy because what happens is those kids get to seventh, eighth grade. They have somebody in their ears saying that they have to leave if they really want to get recruited how they want to, so they go.
hmm.
And sometimes it works out, and then sometimes you have kids that come back because it didn't work out for them.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that it's the nature of the beast now. We just have to do the best that we can to try to like I said, make the decision a little bit difficult. It just off kind of topic a little bit. When I got to Patriot, my biggest thing was I was worried about kids that were going to other schools that probably should have been Patriot because it was their base school because they wanted to go to a specialty program somewhere else.
Mm.
It happens with sports because they're like, well, I don't want to play there. I don't
Yeah.
say, well, I want to make that a difficult decision for kids
Yeah.
because they're like, man, this school is really good. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I stay there and I play there and I grow in that program.
Yeah.
And we get caught in also with kids wanting that instant gratification. They go to the gym and they're there all day and they want somebody to notice it and tell them that they're doing a good job, and they want that offer to validate the work that they're doing to get there, instead of being like, hey, it might not happen when you want it to happen. I
Hmm.
just told that Duke story. That happened after the season was finished. I never
Yep.
talked to them one time. I ended up having a really good year, averaging over 20 points a game. And next thing you know, they have kids leave school and they're like, hey, what's going on with him? At our school, we've had kids that have not been being recruited at all, and not from any fault of their own or anything that we're doing as far as trying to tell coaches. But then all of a sudden they have a big senior year and they're like, hey, what's going on with this kid? Well, I've been telling you about it for 2 years. It's there are kids that are in public school that are really good
Really
if
good.
you come and watch. You don't just think that you have to go to these showcase events or these private school events to find kids that can possibly play at your level. So
Do you do? Well, I'll say this. I won't even ask you. I see some of this stuff, and I'm very vocal, and I'm in a different position than you, and I'm not afraid to have a discussion. And if it needs to get intense, I can do it. I'm of the school of thought, even though I've used social media, my platform to promote my brand and positivity and helping people. I also keep it 100, and I feel like some of this stuff that has occurred the last several years is manufactured hype. I
mm-hmm.
see fake heights, guys being labeled as 6'6" when they really 6'2", talking about he's a dog and the lights come on, he can do this and do that. He shoots 60% from free throws. He can't go left, but you keep showing me these mixtapes that he's killing it because you got young boy playing in the background.
Right.
It annoys me. It
Yeah.
annoys me, and it gets on my nerves because I've seen the guys get exposed. And I'm from the era where when I drop household names of guys I played in both sports, people can get quiet. And I didn't mean to rant about it. I just sometimes look and I'm like, man, y'all killing me with this. But it's the world we live in. So I just tell all the young
Right.
men I work with to keep their nose to the ground and grind and take care of their business in the classroom, man.
I mean, that's all you can do, man. Is that it's, like I said, they have way too much access to everything. They know somebody's supposed stats and how many times they've dunked this and did that. Our kids are playing in a fall league right now at the St. James. And there's a kid that we played against on Thursday that's committed to go to Colorado. He's like 6'7". He'd been dunking everything in the gym. And I didn't know this, but one of the parents told me the kids were in the car on the way to the game, looking up his videos and talking about, I don't know, we ended up blowing him out by 18.
Mm.
You telling me that this team that's a private school, you know what I'm saying? There's a
Mm-hmm.
private school who has multiple kids above 6'6", one
Mm-hmm.
committed to go to a Big 12 school,
Mm-hmm.
are playing against a public school from Nokesville, Virginia, and
Mm-hmm.
we blow them out. And you telling me these kids aren't recruitable at my school?
Exactly.
So it's the hype of it. I mean, you got kids that they'll get a friggin' questionnaire from a school, and then they'll tweet out that they're being recruited or offered by
Oh
somebody.
Lord, yeah, I
And it's
forgot
like,
about that.
I mean, just think about all the questionnaires you got when you were playing,
Yep. Yeah.
and until you got that handwritten signed letter from a coach, you didn't take it serious.
No. Yeah. As a
And
matter,
so,
yeah, it was. I was just happy to get interest. I didn't even know what
right.
was
And
going
so
on.
when you filled out the questionnaires, you were super hyped about it, but you knew it wasn't legit until you talked on the phone with them and they wrote you that letter saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we'd love to have you, and all this other type. So kids get like any sort of random phone call. I mean, listen, it's not just kids. You have programs and coaches that'll say they have kids that are this or that and know damn well, excuse my language,
You okay?
you know what I'm saying? Know damn well that those kids aren't that level or don't have that interest. And I
Right.
and I see it all the time. I've seen people outright lie, talking about this kid got such and such schools calling. Like, no, you don't. Like, why would you say that? Like, why would you even say that? And the problem is, like I said, we talk about the double-edged sword. You got a lot of coaches that won't recruit kids until somebody else is. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they want to ask you is when you talk about a kid, well, who else is talking to him? Who
Yeah.
else? Who else offered him? Who cares? Do you think he's a good basketball player? So, you can't be mad at them
Mm-hmm.
falsifying interest in themselves because that interest, all of a sudden, you see it all the time with like football. Kid all of a sudden tweets out, "I got my first offer from such and such," and next thing you know, he gets 15 other offers
Yep.
in the next week.
Yep.
That happened with Jakai at our school.
Yep.
Kai tweeted out that he got an offer from somebody, and next thing you know, he had 25.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can't tell me that all these people went and did their homework on this kid to offer him a scholarship. They saw such and such school in their conference offer the kid. So now they're like, well, we can't miss out on it. So
Mm-hmm.
let me do that. So it's a very interesting dynamic we got going on these days, man. You just try to navigate the best you can.
Well, Coach, I want to talk a little bit about Patriot, and then I want to get your views on something bigger than basketball, something bigger than me and you. But I want to talk about Patriot.
Mm-hmm.
You did go and play. You did have a pro career, and you had a good career. But you came back to coach. You started off, doing some JV and coaching at your alma mater. But the biggest impact you've had is when you decided to become the coach at Patriot. What, about 6 years ago now?
This will be my fifth year.
Fifth year,
Yeah.
and you came to Patriot, and Patriot's only been around since 2011.
Right.
It's still a newer school, not as new as a new school that's being built now in Gainesville, but you
Right.
came and fast forward, you talk about recruitment and culture and winning and offers, but you've had some talented teams. You've had 20 plus win seasons. You got great players. You've created a culture at Patriot where the football program is well respected and talented and good, and the basketball program is now well respected throughout the state. And you've been knocking on that door. You've been knocking
Mm-hmm.
on that door. I saw your team play against South County. My good friend's son was the guard that night. Y'all played at Osborne Park. Andre Spate.
Mm.
He was a sophomore that year, but I was in the stands with my wife and my son, and the
Mm-hmm.
Patriot Nation, Pioneer Nation showed out. They came in.
Yeah, they did.
It was like being at Cameron. But that is
Right.
part of the culture you and your assistants and your great players have created. Talk about your mindset and your vision when you took over and what continues to be your vision for the program now.
Like I said, I've been blessed to be around a lot of different basketball people. Uh, after finishing playing, Keith Honore, great as far as giving me an opportunity to come coach with a great program and learn some stuff from him as well, and take some things that I could use for myself. When he made me the JV coach, he told me at the time, he said, "I know you have aspirations of being a head coach. I'll let you have it. You do what you want with it." Gave me a lot of freedom to run that how I saw fit. Obviously, he knew I was going to implement a lot of the things that they did at the varsity level, since I was also an assistant for the varsity team. Uh, so after being there for a few years, um, thought I was mentally ready to run my own thing. And the biggest thing that you can do with a team is the culture. Like you said, you're talking about our fans and how they showed out. I remember playing our first district playoff game my first year, and it was only parents in the stands. You laughing? I'm dead serious. I remember sitting there, kids are warming up, and there are 10 people in the stands. And
This is at Patriot.
this is at Patriot. It's a district playoff game, and it is 10 people in the stands.
That is
And I
crazy.
remember thinking at the time, I said, man. And every time something would happen or wouldn't be how I think it should go, I'd be like, we just got to start winning. We start winning, it changes everything. It just changes everybody's mindset. And what those guys that first year, for even though they didn't have the same amount of talent that some of our teams later on have had or that have built, those guys competed and listened, and they heard me get on them and yell at them. They came back every day, even after having some difficult times. The biggest thing that I wanted to do was change their mindset,
Mhm.
because before I got there, the 3 previous years, they had only won 6 games each of those years.
Mm.
So, and I've been around teams that have lost. Playing at William Mary, we never had a winning record. I played on a team overseas that went 4-28, and it was awful.
Mm.
And I just remember being on those teams and how it just seeps into everything you do every day and how you approach your work. And you get into a point where when one bad thing happens, it's a here we go again, instead of what are we going to do to fix it.
Mhm.
And one thing that I remember um, keep talking about with him is that, and one thing that I always thought was great about the teams that I even played on at Potomac is that the difference between a really good team and the teams that are just okay but are pretty good is that good teams do this and they have spikes. Bad teams or okay teams do this and they have dips. And the good teams, when they end up beating you, is because during those spikes, they're going up while you're going down. And so, what I was trying to get the kids to understand is like bad plays are going to happen. This
Mhm.
is not a game of perfection. But
Mhm.
if you're striving to be as perfect as you can, you're not going to stress over the little mistakes here or there as we go.
Mhm.
And I try to do the best I can to not overly react to the mistakes they go, unless it's my point guard turned the basketball over. But even then, I understand that it happens because there's nobody that's gone through a game that's made every shot and never turned the ball over and
Yeah.
got every assignment right. So you try to make your kids as confident as possible to understand, even though they make mistakes, you still believe in them to go make a play.
Mhm.
So it was important to change that mindset, and it was a gradual thing. We went through the summer. I remember going to team camp that first year, and our varsity team went down there, and we did not win one game. We went 0-8.
Really?
And I remember sitting there. We're at University of Richmond, and I looked at the rest of the coaching staff. I said, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Because we were just a lot of us were coming from Potomac. We were used to winning. It wasn't something we were used to. Now we were competing. They were getting after it, but something would happen, and we would end up losing. We weren't getting blown out. We weren't making winning basketball plays, and went through the fall league, and it was getting a little bit better. Then we got into the season, and I'm like, all right, we might be there. And then we open up with Garfield, and we're up 15, and I'll take a lot of the blame for this, and we end up losing the game. I should have took a timeout when they went on a run. But this is
Mm-hmm.
also me learning to be a head coach at that level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of growing pains going through it. And like I said, by the end of the year, we played W.T. Woodson at Woodson, who's the eventual state champ. We take them to double overtime
Wow.
at their place. So we were a missed three away from going to the state tournament my first year at being a head coach. And to think that those kids put themselves in that position at that point was amazing, looking at what they were in the month of June, because there was no way
No
that I
doubt.
thought that was possible. So that we had a lot of guys that were going to return the next year from that team. And I remember Drake Marshall came up to me in the locker room and said, Coach, when do we start workouts? We just lost. And I was like, man, this we have changed the culture. Like that right there let me know
Yeah.
those kids were ready to get into the gym. They were ready to start the work to be good the next year. And the next year, that it was the start of our run of winning the district every year since. So we won it 3 years straight. We we um we were the number one seed going into the regional playoffs. Ike Onwuka was a great player at Patriot football and basketball. Ends up hurting himself in the first half,
Oh.
so that stinks. So he wasn't the same up until that point. He was dominant. But so then the next year, those guys that were on that team that were coming back felt the pain of being close and not winning, and seeing that they could win. So next thing you
Mm-hmm.
know, we go from winning 15 games, which was a high for the school for the basketball program at the time. Listen, the year before we didn't set it. We won 11, but that was the first year that we had won a regional playoff game. The next year, we are the one seed for the first time and win the district for the first time. Then
Mm.
next thing you know, we start out the next year. We go 11-0 to start the season. And it's I just remember you've seen Major League before, the
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
You
movie.
remember when he's talking to the team, he said, "Guys, we won one game in a row. You win a couple more of these, that's called a winning streak. I know those things haven't
Yeah.
happened here before." That was the same things I said to the team that year that we won 15 games. I said, "You guys have never had a winning streak. Never happened. You have won 3 games in a row." And it was just so funny to look at how you look at little stepping stones to build it to all of a sudden now you have a team that wins 23 games and is in the state quarterfinals. And it just looks like it was just a natural thing that just happened. And it wasn't. It was the work that those kids were putting in
Mm-hmm.
behind closed doors, and the the expectations they had for the younger guys behind them to do
Mm-hmm.
that. I tell those kids every time I see them, I say, you guys are the reason that these teams are how they are right now. You
Yep.
set the bar as far as the culture we have. And that's what I talk to the older guys every time we're doing a conditioning. I said, you have to understand that everything you do, those younger guys are watching. Because I remember when you guys were at the back of the lines running, and those older guys were up ahead of you. And now I'm looking at you doing the same thing. Don't goof off and make them think that that's what you get to do when you become a junior or senior.
Mm.
You have to have them understand this is what you're supposed to do, and this is the standard we have set up for. So, like I said, you go to 23 wins, and you graduate 8 kids, and you're like, man, we might take a step back. And the next year, we win 16 games in a row. So,
Yeah.
and that was with a team that nobody expected to do that. So that's a 21 win team. And now we're bringing back 8 guys from this team, and I'm thinking, and we're small. We don't have a whole lot of size. We lost a kid to a private school that was 6'7", and we come out and I'm watching them play in this fall league, and we're 4-0 playing against all these top teams from Virginia and Maryland. I'm like, it's something. Once it gets started, it's just the train keeps rolling as long as you keep doing it the right
That's what's up, man. That's awesome.
way. Mm-hmm.
And that's part of a credit to you and your coaching staff and the standard you guys have built in the culture. And similar to that standard, you have a standard in your family. You're a very loving father.
Mm-hmm.
I have the privilege of following you on multiple social media outlets, man, and you are very entertaining. I know your players, you can roast them every now and then, but if when you allow people in your world, you're funny. You're musical. You and your sons, it's like watching a reality TV show. Um, and you take being a father very seriously because you have a great father and mother yourself.
Right.
But with that being said, the climate we are in 2020, Coach,
Mm-hmm.
um, You and I have talked about this with other coaches in Northern Virginia, high school coaches, about what we deal with and what we've seen, the tragedies, the traumatic events, even going back to your days of growing up in Potomac and even as you traveled, from social injustice to racial profiling to the hypocrisy, as far as what you and I deal with as black men, successful black men, versus what people stereotype and what the reality is. You have been outspoken, but not negatively. You talked about what needs to be done,
Mm-hmm.
and you have sons. Um, what goes through your mind, and what do you think needs to happen? I don't want to get too political, but
Right.
that's a tough question, but I still want to ask you because I respect your insight. You're raising men on the
Right.
court at Patriot High School, your students, even the non-athletes. You have three sons. When you're talking to kids and you're talking to young men, even young women, what do you say if I say, you know what, this is how it's always going to be, or I feel like giving up, or
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I mean, the biggest thing that talking about raising men. It's so funny you say that. I just had a conversation with um, one of our incoming freshmen. I talked to his mother the other day, and it was a conversation I had with her. It's a conversation I had with a parent when I first got to Patriot, about accountability and raising young men and little things that we might not think of because we're so like us as parents now. It's so different than how it was like when like we were kids. Like our
Mm-hmm.
parents kind of let us do our own thing and kind of learn stuff. Where now like parents want to kind of protect their kids from everything and
Mm-hmm.
don't want them to ever want for something or never be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
um, so a lot of times what you have happen is that like you have a kid say a kid can't be at something or something happens. And I remember like it was yesterday when it first happened. A parent sent me an email to let me know that their son wasn't going to be at something. This kid ended up being an all district kid and all region kid,
Mm.
uh, as a senior, but this was his junior year. And I said, I really appreciate you letting me know. I said, but from now on, I don't want to hear from you in regards to that. I want to hear from your son. I said, this is no way in disrespect to you because I appreciate you reaching out and conversation. I said, but it's very important that your son learn how to communicate when he has to. And you're not the person that's going to miss practice, Dad. It's your son who's going to miss practice. So why is he going to miss? And then just let me know so I can know that he can feel comfortable to talk to me about something, as little as not being at something. So when something bigger comes, it's not so awkward for him. And it was the same thing I told this mom like last week. I said, let him know that it is important for him to communicate these things as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not saying that women don't have to do the same, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm coaching men, young men. So that's
Mm-hmm.
and I'm raising young men. So I always tell them, I said, you have to communicate. I tell my boys all the time when I'm talking to them and you ask them something about why they did something, the first thing they want to tell you, well, mom said, I said, I didn't ask you what mom said. I'm asking you what you said. I mean, listen, my 20-year-old son, I'm old now, I just turned 20 at the beginning of this month. I've talked to him to this day, and he always wants to try to tell me what his mom told him or what. I said, listen, man, I don't care about nothing about what your mom talking about when it comes to that. That's not saying that I don't want her opinion. I want you to be able to express to me what's happening and to tell me. I said,
Mm-hmm.
because I've already talked to your mother about it. So we've had a conversation. I don't need you to tell me, hey, this is what she said, or maybe you should go ask her. When
Mm-hmm.
I ask you where your shoes are, I want you to tell me or go find them. I
Okay.
don't want you to tell me, well, mom put them there. So it's very important, like you said, especially, with us as black men, we got to be able to communicate effectively. And, so we don't put ourselves in situations where we might come into harm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Coach, great answer, man. And my last question is not so much a question, but we're at the point of the show where we end it, where I allow my guests to share their final thoughts about what life lessons they've learned so far. You had the distinct privilege of being a standout player. You played collegiately, you played overseas, you played against some of the best high school and collegiate players in the country. And that's been a great opportunity. But you also are an educator, you're a leader, and that's a platform many people run from. You haven't. You took over a program in Patriot and built it into a standard in Northern Virginia and throughout the state where the expectations are high every year.
Mm-hmm.
But you have humble approach. You know when to be confident, but you know when to be humble. And with all that being said, you're a father, you have all these different roles that you play throughout the day. What would you tell the next Sherman Rivers coming up on Route 1 or in Bristol or in Woodbridge or in Fairfax? And what advice would you give them, the people watching this video, to continue to persevere and stay the course and stay faithful? What has life taught you and what do you give as far as feedback?
I mean, the biggest thing you do is, man, just try to stay as true to yourself as possible, and do the best you can whenever you can. Um,
Mhm.
we talked about, like, basketball is not perfect. Life isn't perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. But if you're doing the best you can and are trying to be as true to yourself as possible, then it is what it is. You know, you can deal with the mistakes and the learning experiences, and don't be so wrapped up into what people think or what they, or what their opinion is of you. And that's not saying that I don't care about those things, because clearly, like, as an educator, a coach, and person that's out in the forefront, a lot of stuff, I realize that there are a lot of eyes on me and people are watching the things that I'm going to say or do. But it's not always about you. It's there's a lot of other things, a lot of other factors that go into what happened. Like, I know I get a lot of the credit for what goes on at Patriot as far as the basketball program, but we have an amazing staff of men that do go above and beyond to help and do the things that they do. I might get the credit for making all these great decisions, but you see me having multiple conversations with these guys throughout games and practices, and after practice, calling them on the phone and sitting there with them. And just at the end of the day, I know that I got to make the final decision, because at the end of the day, I'm the one in charge. So,
Mm.
but it's like you said, just being able to draw on different people. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. You don't have all the answers. You like to think that you do. Don't get yourself in a situation where now where you could have just asked somebody to help you out. Now you're just stuck in it, like, well, if I just did this, this wouldn't have happened. And the biggest thing is, like, on the other side of it, for people that are in charge or adults, don't be so judgmental.
Mm.
Don't be so
Mm.
that bothers me every day when I'm looking at, like, fellow educators or coaches, and people being like, I can't believe these kids do that. Well, do you remember what you did when you were that age? Like, like, your mindset is that of an adult, and you're still making bad decisions.
Mm.
Think about how you were when you were 15, 16, 17, 18, 21 years old, trying to navigate through life and make correct decisions and do the right thing. So
Yeah.
be understand that people are going to make mistakes, man. Hold them accountable, but at the same time, let them know that you're there for them and that you're going to do everything you can to help them through stuff.
Outstanding. Wise
Yep.
words from a wise man, Coach Sherman Rivers, man. My guy. I
Yeah,
appreciate you for
man.
jumping on. This was fun. This was insightful. And most importantly, man, I appreciate it. And I know people, when they see this, will appreciate it. This has been good. And I'm your
Yeah,
host,
man.
Dwight Vick. That is head coach Sherman Rivers, Patriot High School, former Potomac High School, and Women Mary Standout basketball guard, father, leader of men and women at Patriot High School.
Hmm.
This has been good, coach, as I said just a second ago. And on behalf of Victory Life, we thank you for jumping on. And like I say, every episode, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a positive impact and you leave a great legacy. Thank you, coach. I
No
appreciate it.
problem, man. I appreciate you having me.